Hey, what's up neighbors? aaFlare here, bringing you another Destiny video. Today's video we're going to look at the Boltcaster 2.0 brought to Destiny 2, named the Temptation's Hook, just basically Boltcaster in a legendary form that you can get random rolls on. So if you don't know what Boltcaster is, it's basically a sword that lets you fire a projectile similar to Black Talon, except it kind of has a lingering effect instead of it just being instant damage like Black Talon does. So if you haven't gotten one of these already, you'll notice there's a lot of different perks you can have in the final column. We're going to take a look at each one of these today and figure out which one is actually the best option. Since a lot of them are really good perks, it's just some of them don't either mix well with it or aren't as good as you might think. So starting off with the one we're really not going to look into much at all is Flash Counter. Flash Counter is a really good perk on swords. I'd say is actually one of the best perks for swords, just not this one in particular. Since the whole purpose of this thing is to be someone at a distance to do the sword damage, getting close and then losing your ability to do your heavy attack for, I'd say, like half of the debuff is kind of useless and just kind of goes against the idea of the sword. Although it does provide a decent damage increase and stuns the enemy you are, well, stuns the enemy that you stun. It doesn't mix well with the sword, so I didn't even bother really testing it. And then the one I was actually really excited for was On Guard, which, if you don't know what that does, is immediately swapping to the sword allows you to do bonus damage. So on paper, it seems perfect for this, right? You switch to the sword and do your heavy attack. However, as you can see right here, the perk doesn't actually last long enough for you to take full advantage of that damage increase. So I'll do it one more time. Even instantly, you'll get maybe 3-4 of the ticks of damage to actually do the increased damage, and then you're kind of just stuck with the normal damage afterwards. So On Guard, if it would have worked so that the whole projectile that's fired has increased damage, it would be definitely the best one to pick. But because it doesn't, On Guard is poop. So On Guard, Flash Counter, if you have that, it's not, I wouldn't recommend. Next, we're going to look at Vorpal Weapon. So Vorpal Weapon basically just lets you do increased damage to bosses, and it gives you a 15% damage increase at all times against all bosses. So regardless, I don't have to do anything to proc the damage on this ogre. I just continuously get the full damage increase, and then if you were to put a Boss Spec on it, you get about 24-25% damage increase, which is really good, right? But there are other perks that give you a bigger damage increase. So this one is by far the most consistent and reliable one, since you literally have to do nothing and you get increased damage against bosses. But looking at something like Whirlwind Blade, which I don't have on any of these Temptations hooks, so we just took the numbers from Fallen Guillotine and transferred the percentages over. It ends up being about 23% damage increase at a × 5, and then 28 to about 30%. It's kind of rounded a bit, but it's 28 to 30% damage increase when you're at × 5 with a Boss Spec. So the only issue with this is that, once again, it kind of defeats the purpose of what this sword is trying to do, since you have to get up close and, of course, hit the target 5 times. And then, so this is just going to be kind of simulated here. And then you'd use the projectile, which I guess still works, but once again, it kind of defeats the purpose of the sword, and you might as well just use Fallen Guillotine at that point. And then finally, the perk I think is the absolute winner here is Surrounded, with Surrounded Spec. So Surrounded just basically increases your damage when you're surrounded by, I believe it's 3 enemies. So right here, and it's got a decent proximity. This, of course, does have Surrounded Spec on it, but I don't think that increases the proximity whatsoever. So Surrounded gives you just a base 20% damage increase, and then with Surrounded Spec, it's 29 to 30% damage increase, which is the highest damage increase you can get for the perks. alongside with Whirlwind Blade ×5 and flash, or not flash counter, and on guard. But as you know, on guard doesn't work properly with this thing. So what basically that means is I could be standing over here by all these enemies. So these, let's say they're like Thrall or something, and I can toss this and get the damage increase from all the way over here without really having to be threatened by the actual boss. So this pretty much keeps you safe and lets you use the sword how you want it's meant to be used, which is at a distance, and just kind of fire that off, and then let's say fire some sniper shots off, right? So if I were to choose the two best perks between, or to have on the sword for things like strikes or Pit of Heresy and things like that, where there's a lot of adds that are kind of around you at the same time as the boss fight, Surrounded Spec would be the way to go. And then for something where there's not really many adds, so let's say like the Prophecy Dungeon, and you wanted to use a sword, or a lot of the raids, since a lot of the time during boss fight phases or boss DPS phases, there aren't really many adds spawning at the same time, so you won't really be able to proc the Surrounded Spec. Vorpal Weapon would be the way to go, especially for things like in the Garden of Salvation raid. Both the bosses, I literally forget their names because I haven't done that raid in so long, but the Harpy boss, it's literally running away from you, so you can't really proc Whirlwind Blade too well. And then the Sanctified Mind, well, it's, you know, you can't really get close to it, especially since it's up in the air floating. So Vorpal Weapon would just give you that damage increase all the time. Not that you really want to use these swords as DPS in raids, but I mean, they are options. So guys, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for future content. We're going to check out Fallen Guillotine next, once I, am able to farm it, since I can't really farm it yet, since my season pass is not high enough, and I don't even have the pulse rifle unlocked yet. But if you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for future content. Thanks for watching. Peace.